All right, we are back with steady rotation. How we doing, Queso?
Hey man, we're still in recovery mode right now, but as you guys might be able to tell, I finally, decided to get out of the bat cave and invest in a proper mic setup. So hopefully my mumble ass will now be clearer than ever in HD. Also, don't stay up until 4 a.m. kids. It's not worth
Why is that?
it. Not in college again. We are no longer in college. We're built different.
Yeah, man, I can hear it in your voice right now. You're in your NPR shit right now.
How are you feeling today, Sir Vic?
Kind of similar. Just also I think rest is just key. I think that's if there's anything that we're gonna talk about today, besides the music, is that rest is key, and that means no more partying too late, no more drinking. Uh, I mean, you can, but we're not the young bucks that we used to be.
That recklessness within our blood system, I guess, got
Yeah,
evaporated at some point.
exactly. But I think just jumping off the bat here, and starting to talk about, because hip hop is one of those genres, right? Where yes, it is one genre, but there's a lot of influences, and it began in this subsection of New York City back in the 70s, coming out of the Bronx, and it kind of
Hmm.
just exploded. It went in every kind of direction, landed in different parts of the country, and each kind of region of each country kind of took their own, whether it was the way that they rap, the production style, even going down to how they were dressing. Each kind of region had their own say in what they would kind of describe as their version of hip hop, their version of rap. And I think when we think about East Coast hip hop or like New York hip hop, a certain sound pops in your mind. When you think about West Coast, you think about something specifically with that too. That doesn't really sound the same with East Coast hip hop. Same thing with the
Not
South.
at
Same
all.
thing with Chicago. Same thing with Texas. Same thing, and even in the South, you've got your regions within that. You've got the Memphis sound. You've got Atlanta. You've got Florida. Um, so yeah, and
Don't forget about Crunk too. Don't Crunk ain't dead.
uh-huh. But it's interesting because I think this discussion might have been a little bit more like uh, I think this is my opinion, but I think this discussion was a little bit more relevant maybe 10, 15 years ago, even 20. Whereas
Yeah,
now
I'd
I
say
think,
20.
whereas now I don't think it's like that much of a driving factor behind, how artists kind of blow up. Maybe more so. I think artists coming out from Atlanta or the South in general do have a little bit more popularity, but I don't know if that's just because the game has shifted towards that area now versus
Yeah.
like 20 years ago where it was East versus West. Um, so I don't know. Just talking about this is like actually kind of interesting because, like I said, all these regions have their own kind of unique sounds and unique artists, and everyone. I think each region has its own like goat, and I think those goats are actually like they're all like in the top 10, top 15 like rap hip hop artists of all time. So it's very interesting that like it's not necessarily like one region is taking over the whole goat discussion. Maybe it is, maybe it is not. I see your face right now. You're kind of, but yeah.
It's time out. Foul play on the field, Chief.
Okay.
Foul play on the Chief.
What you mean?
All right, so all right, first and foremost, we have to acknowledge that obviously New York is, like you said, the mecca, the birthplace of hip hop, right?
Hmm.
It's sort of cemented for that region. As East Coasters will probably have a natural bias to be like, yeah, that East, like the East Coast stuff, that's the real hip hop. But there's no, quote unquote quintessential real hip hop. I
Yeah.
think hip hop is what you make out of it. Obviously, we have our preferences. If you
Hmm.
guys remember last week's episode, my boy over here likes storytelling. I like wordplay and rhyme schemes. Not all styles of hip hop appreciate that, but that's neither here nor there. I mean, for the past 10, 15, some would even say 20, but I'll just say 10, 15 years, Atlanta has been dominating the soundscape of hip hop. It's hard to, it's hard for me to say that, but that's factual. Sure, we might see like, buddings here and there, especially in the Florida and Chicago scene once in a while, but consistently, or at least, within the past, internet age of the 10 years, the
Mm-hmm.
2010s, the Atlanta sound has definitely been pervasive throughout, the soundscape of hip hop. Again, I'd like people to restore the feeling in New York, but Troy Ave failed, unfortunately. Right now, what seems to be big in New York is that New York drill, which some could even say is an offshoot of UK drill, but
Mm-hmm.
I'll let the hip hop historians talk about that. But I think it's disingenuous for us to say that, and again, because we label rap in this sort of limited box, that every region's pioneers or kings are recognized recognized by the larger body of hip hop. For instance, Lil Jon, he is a crunk legend. That man's party tracks will forever live on.
Mm-hmm.
Headbanging again. If we could go back to those college days when before we knew better, that would be the soundtrack to many nights forgotten, but nights we'll still fondly think of, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think anybody, unless you're from the South or were raised in that era, will ever even speak of Lil Jon as anything but that party dude. Or let's even bring up Gucci Mane, right?
Sure.
One of the most quintessential rappers to promote and push the Atlanta sound. Like there's so many of Gucci's children, so many of Gucci's cosigns that been able to infiltrate from the game. The Migos, Waka Flocka, Young Thugger, so many. You can obviously add more, but I'm sure there are people who look at Gucci Mane and say he ain't top nothing. He's arguably barely rapping, but obviously his influence is felt. So I guess all of that to say that I definitely agree that every region has their influencers, but I think on a larger scope, again, when we just talk about hip hop in general, most people would remove these regional kings or regional kings or legends as nothing more than either cool rappers, I guess, or nothing special. And that goes probably back to again that East Coast bias of like the Nas's, the Jay Z's,
Sure.
the Kanye's, maybe depending who you ask. Well, like the Nas, Jay Z, Tupac for sure, maybe Eminem, depending who you ask. And then like number five is always kind of like up in the air, right? Some people say Andre, Tree Stack, shout out to him.
Well,
Some people would
yeah.
say,
Yeah.
so yeah, all of that to say that. But it is interesting, like you mentioned, how now the regional approach feels a little bit not unnecessary, but I guess no longer as impactful, and that's obviously due to the internet. Go back to the internet, right?
Yep.
I think most people can agree and say that you're influenced by your surroundings or your environment. The internet opened our environment up to the entire world. So rather than just being forced to hear the music that was played on your local radio station, you had access to hear stuff outside of that, and whatever you gravitate towards your younger years, you're able to gravitate. That's how you even get, let's say, an Isaiah Rashad dude who, obviously coming from Chattanooga, Tennessee. To be honest with you, I definitely sense Southern influences in his writing style, and maybe Sonic's a little bit. But yeah, if you told me that he was like an LA rapper, I would have never questioned it. To be honest with you, that would have never been something I would question until I knew more of his background and obviously digging in those interviews. So it's just interesting to see that all the different styles are kind of melding together into whatever people want. That's why you have again that melodic Atlanta, trap sound still pervasive in different regions. New York, y'all lost your identity. I'm sorry, but you take the wheel right now.
No, I mean, I guess each region, like, if you didn't grow up in those regions, you will really never understand like the actual like popularity of like someone like Lil Jon or like the influence of someone like Gucci Mane to the Atlanta sound. But I still think that each region like has these like immense and like impactful artists that like push the game further. Like just because Gucci Mane's never had a diamond album doesn't mean, like you said it yourself, like he was kind of the driving force in the 2000s era about like creating this sound and really putting people on and giving birth to all these, basically the people kind of dominated the charts in the 10s for hip hop, like Thugger, like Flocka. Flocka's a very like party driven kind of artist, but still like, and then like still looking at the artists that branch off of from those guys. So like you look at Young Thug, who like gave birth to Lil Baby and Gunna and basically half the cats on YSL. Like they're all like clones of him. But yeah, Offspring. So it's kind of when we talk about like regions, like, oh, this dude's from Florida or this dude's from, I still like think that holds some weight, and I kind of miss that aspect, because I think when we like watch like movies or like documentaries about like guys from like the 90s or the early 2000s, like that was like something that was like really important to get across in your music, that like I'm from New York, or like I'm from LA, I'm from Watts, I'm from Compton, I'm from Houston, this is how we sound, like chopped and screwed, like I'm from Chicago. I think honestly, like now there's like not so much of that anymore, and I do agree, like the internet kind of pushed this narrative of like, you could just be your own artist now. You don't have to be like, you don't have to be put on by your radio station anymore, by your local radio station. You don't have to pay these DJs to play your single. Now it's all up to you, which is kind of scary if you're maybe like someone who's coming out and trying to put your music like on the streaming services. But the good thing now is that you have control over that, not necessarily so much so like these regional labels like Death Row or something, like a radio station in New York, that won't play your music because they've got a monopoly on some other people who can actually pay up front to like play these singles. So now we've got like the age of the internet. Now you can be your own artist. And I do agree with like the thing about Isaiah is like there is that southern influence. There is that southern kind of tone in his voice and his production style, the beats that he chooses to rap over. But I also
definitely in his bars.
Yeah.
Like his homages. There's a lot of homages in his bars.
And I think being on a label like TDE like allows him to kind of meld these two regions together, where he can kind of come out with the sound of like sounding like, taking bits and pieces from the South, from Tennessee, especially an incredibly influential, region of hip hop, and combining that with, the label, his fellow co-stars on the TDE label, just being in LA, like he can kind of combine that sound and create something totally new, and like doesn't have to be like, I'm from the South or I'm from the West Coast. Like I think he's simply just Isaiah, and then be somewhat of a popular artist with that sound too. It's nothing like, like people like are upset with this combination sonically, right? We still gravitate towards his music because we like both.
I mean, do we though? Don't you think there might be some people who have issues with his current release, perhaps?
Maybe.
Captain Kirk's, maybe?
Some Captain Kirk alert. But yeah, like I think the regional stuff, like kind of like that gatekeeping was like, might have held, I don't know if it held back anything back in the past, like from that era where it was really popular versus now, because I do kind of miss it almost, like it kept things interesting, and I think it had like a level of competition, right, where now like everyone is kind of like their own thing, and not just the artists, like the labels themselves, where there's not really like this competitive, or like, our region is better than yours, compared to like the 90s where it was like East versus West. And then like later in the mid 90s, you had the South coming up with Outkast, from Atlanta, trying to challenge the title, challenging the both, like, hey, we got something to say too, like, we're spitting bars down here. So it's like, you look back at that, you're like damn, like that was actually kind of interesting, and kept things kind of, spicy, and like you had like both on like these three regions kind of going back and forth versus now where like the floodgates are kind of open, everyone's just, you know, putting out music, and it's kind of just like this. The playing field, I think, is just a little bit more level. What you
So
got?
from your take, I guess where I would at least challenge you, or at least want to point out maybe something, I do think there is a quote unquote difference between the ideas of a gatekeeper and the idea of regional sounds, right? So yeah, obviously we agree. The internet removed both the gatekeepers and the distinct regional sounds that we know in hip hop, or new at least.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess in my eyes, gatekeeping, I've never particularly, well, obviously it's great that, like you said, now everybody can, everybody who has the mic, the time, the record, like the equipment and the time and the resources with their own creative ideas, has the ability to allow their stuff to be heard and hopefully will be picked up and allow them to live out their musical dreams or get bands and bases or whatever. But I guess I never had the issue with the idea of gatekeepers, only because gatekeepers kind of force the soundscape to reach a certain level. Because you and I both agree they're questionable artists at best currently out there. And granted,
I don't know about that.
No? Oh, no, you okay, let me hear this.
All right, go ahead.
Well, so how I look at gatekeeping is, people saying, hey, like, you're not reaching this plateau of influence until your music reaches a certain, a certain level of quality. Now, of course, that level of quality also is then intermingled with financial gain and what is marketable, right? Which is kind of like the sour spot in hip hop, specifically making accessible music. I thought the whole point is to make quote unquote real stuff or something relatable to the average folk. But I do think that we could, let's say, live in a world without gatekeepers, right? But still have people still be very much, I guess, identified in their soundscape. It's just that because people, the kids who are growing up or raised, either, like you said, never felt that strong connection towards their region again, where they felt that they had to identify or promote said region, and they said, I'm going to just be me, I'm going to do my own thing. Or maybe, I don't know, people are like, we're just all humans. What does it matter from the South and I'm supposed to sound chopped and screwed? I like the auto-tune sound. I want to do the Lil Wayne stuff. And I think what's one thing that's really interesting, because one artist that always comes to mind to me when we talk about, like, I guess the definer or the person who sort of influenced hip-hop so much is Lil Wayne. Obviously, Kanye West did his thing as well, but Lil Wayne is, like, for whatever reason, like that one artist that from the trap rappers, SoundCloud rappers, spiritual, lyrical, miracle, wonderful rappers, or whatever, most of them will always say, Lil Wayne influenced my approach, either by my bars, by introduction of autotune, whatever, X, Y's, and Z's. And somehow I feel like Lil Wayne was almost like just such a universally beloved artist that people said, hey, regardless of what my local people are doing, I want some of that right there too. Obviously, the people from that
he definitely checks.
Like,
he definitely checks the boxes for like a lot of things, and everyone has a specific thing that they like about rap or hip hop, and he's basically like good at almost every one of those categories. So it's like how can you not like this dude, like, or respect like
Weezy F, baby,
his game, But yeah, continue. My fault.
I mean, no. I mean, that's pretty much it. So I guess my brain says we could still have regional differences, but allow people to make, without having the gatekeepers that allows people to make their music. I just think that the reason why those differences are more homogenized now is, people have exposure to more things, and people will just say, hey, I don't have to just listen to the gangster rappers of my area. I can listen to some Chicago stuff and take influence from that. Or hell, like, I can even listen to like rap from outside of the country and listen to like Japanese homies. Like, no cap, Japanese producers, they're at a different level. I don't know what it is that they do, because they don't do drugs over there. So this must be in the water or something. Ooh. Ooh.
Yeah. The only aspect of like the gatekeeping that I don't like in terms of when it comes to like regions is that it really does close off like a lot of potential for creativity. Like, and I kind of like think about like, like they were kind of in the news not too long ago with their versus battle, but like Dipset, and they're coming from Harlem, and they were very vocal about like always saying like you gotta dress like you're from Harlem, you gotta sound like you're from Harlem, But what does that really mean? Like you're kind of defining that for yourself and trying to like almost kind of impose your own values or beliefs in what, like, not only the Harlem sound but maybe the New York sound, which is like, to me, in my opinion, that's the most valuable uh like region in this whole game, even though it's kind of like in this kind of weird place right now where like no one's really kind of taking the throne, or like labels not really taking the throne for the East Coast. But like when you like look back to like interviews or like, sound bites or whatever, like even in their music, like saying like, like X and X is why we're from Harlem and this is why we're popular. It almost kind of, when you say those kind of things, and like you kind of close the door on like being able to expand on your sound, right? Like imagine if like Eminem coming from Detroit, and I don't think he would have ever done this, but like imagine if he was like, with his popularity, with the amount of albums he sold, he was like, this is what Detroit sounds like, this is what Detroit music is, and there's nothing that can like define it. There's nothing else that can define it. And then like we never get someone like Denny Brown, right? Who was like arguably one of the most out there, but like in a creative and boundary pushing way, like as an artist from Detroit. There's nothing really, especially like now, like there's still some, I guess, references to Detroit, and maybe the production style like represents like some of that gritty and griminess of that city. But that
Mm-hmm.
dude, I mean, me and you both know, like this dude has albums of just like the quirkiest, darkest, grimiest, dirtiest beats, and the way that he raps or flows is definitely like not traditional in any hip hop sense, unless he's like actually just using his calm voice, on some
Here's my
tracks.
response to that.
Uh-huh.
Here's my response to that. Really though,
Yeah, exactly. Um, but it's like that's like the only thing about, and I'm like actually like thinking about it now for like Atlanta. They're kind of the chart toppers now, and they're kind of like very vocal about being from Atlanta. But is it anything? And this is why I think like Young Thug is like such a, he. I wouldn't say he's underrated. I definitely think he's maybe underappreciated in terms of like being like people recognizing his influence, because he's so creative.
really,
Yeah, I don't think a lot.
really.
Do you see the slander he gets a lot?
Okay, so hmm,
I think people like disregard him because of his like style and like the
his
way that he
like his
sounds.
antics.
No, like I think
See,
just the way that he's. I mean, outside of like like actual like hip hop heads, people like from the general public don't really give Thugger his flowers. And that, I
okay. I
think that's
mean, all right.
represented in album sales, like um, recognition. And I'm just talking about this in a general sense. Obviously, we know how influential Thugger is, but um, I
I
think.
guess yeah. I definitely agree with you. Until very recently, with his like last two albums, right?
Mhm,
The last Slime Language, I want to say YSL
mhm,
collaboration tape or compilation tape, excuse me, and just having fun. Yeah, you're right. Man's for whatever reason wasn't making financial hits, or like he's like his records wouldn't sell well for whatever reason, even
yeah.
though the music was there. But I guess, and like again, I always have a hard time using financial gain as a representative of appreciation, at least in hip hop, because
Mhm.
um,
I'm
because
just
I guess
saying, I
like
think we definitely appreciate him and listen to his music, but to the general public, I don't think that's on the same
I,
level compared to
I
us.
mean, I can't speak for you. Me personally, I don't really put Thug on in my mix like that. I'm not mad at it. It's just not what I quote unquote go for. But I
Mhm.
guess I recognize the influence specifically because of all the artists that came from his lineage, right? Which obviously you
Mhm.
could say Tulsa comes from Wayne, but sticking with Thugger as that point
Yeah.
of reference, from the Trippies to the Uzis to the Gunners and Little Babies. I feel like I guess to me, if you are able to have so many offsprings and they're vocal about you being the source of that inspiration or one of the sources,
Mhm.
I guess to me that would be more definitive of recognizing the influence or the appreciation
Right.
rather than what the general public thinks. Because I guess Well, I guess no. I hear what you're saying. Ultimately, what you're saying is that it's not as if like if I said to a random person, "Hey, Lil Wayne, Kanye, Drake, Kendrick or whatever," they'd at least recognize the significance of the name, or maybe even Travis to some degree. Travis is like 50-50. But I guess Young Thug isn't in that superstar lane yet. Where okay, I'll give you that.
No.
Yeah,
I
okay,
mean,
yeah, I'll
definitely,
agree
like,
with you.
he's influential, but, like, to me, he's actually, like, the key that broke the floodgates, or, like, he's the key that broke the gatekeeping, because he allowed all the
Mm-hmm.
Lils, all the guys on the YSL label to actually stem off from him and able to have bigger careers than he has had, you know, in a shorter amount of time. I think still Thugger is like, he's a household name. He almost gets to co-headline like huge festivals like Rolling Loud. He's still up. He's top bill hip hop artist, but he's come a long way since like 2011, 2012 when people were clowning him back then. And I think you I'm also from the perspective of like someone who's actually like listened to him since back then, like since probably senior year in high school. Like, like it was almost like you're listening to him as like a meme, and then he comes out with like the barter tapes, the slime tapes, all these mixtapes, and the music videos that came out with it, and you're like, this guy's kind of interesting. Like, he's doesn't sound like anybody that I really would consider like Atlanta, but like there's still that Atlanta sound in terms of the production, what he's rapping about, and I'm like, okay, like this guy's like actually he's got something here, like a Danny Brown, like you can like almost recognize that, like, because this person is kind of pushing the creative boundaries outside of the regional, like, I guess, like I feel like each region has like a certain sound and traditions and like whatever you want to say, right? And when you get an artist like
Mm-hmm.
Danny Brown or Young Thug who begin to kind of create their own kind of sound, people are kind of like, oh, this is kind of weird. This is kind of like what is this, like, weird, mysterious, dark shit? Like, what is this dude even rapping about? Why does he sound like this? And I think that's
Yo,
why these guys are underappreciated, is because on a surface level, a lot of people just like listen to their music as like, this shit is weird. This is not. This is. I don't claim this for my city, or I don't claim this for my region.
hold up though. I put the crack in my crack, and I put the brack in my brack.
Yeah.
Metro Boomin, Young Thug, and Rich Homie Quan, or whatever that their duo is called. That was a that was a moment in hip hop, man.
Yeah.
It's a moment in hip hop.
Yeah,
But
but the
nah,
like
but
shit
yeah,
like that, like, is like, would we ever get that? Maybe like 20 years ago? Like, no, probably not. But like these guys decide to take that step forward, decide to kind of create or break that creative boundary, and really craft this sound where like now we have guys like Gunna, Lil Baby, Young Nudie, um, maybe some of the Lils too. I think the Lils come from mostly like that SoundCloud era, and like SoundCloud era is like its own region. In the internet age, it's like its own. You got your DatPiff, you got your SoundCloud, you've got your YouTube regions. Like this is where the game is at now, or was, and now it's kind of more like leaning very heavily towards streaming. And I think YouTube is still very relevant because you got a guy like NBA YoungBoy who has hundreds and hundreds of millions of views on his music videos. So it's like almost surprising, like who, like what, like doesn't make sense. But
yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
just
Young
go.
Boy's it's definitely a sleeper hitter, I guess.
Yeah,
I don't know where he gets his fans from, but the support is felt for
yeah.
sure.
So to like kind of like, I don't know, like sometimes that gatekeeping is like you don't want like people to kind of like disrespect your region or to kind of like make fun of it. So like maybe you do get a little defensive about where you're from and how you sound and like how you represent your city or region or state, whatever it is. But then you have to kind of also question, like, what is the purpose of this? Does this actually help us, or does it hurt us? Because now that I'm thinking about it, like maybe that's kind of why New York is in this place right now, is because like now they're kind of just imitating like UK drill, like no offense to UK, but like y'all are the this is the king. This is the region where kings of hip hop have come out. These are where rap goats have come out, and now we're at this spot like where I think over the years, like there hasn't been too much like there hasn't been like somebody like who's kind of pushed that boundary or kind of like try to open things up in a way, and I think that's why we're in this spot right now where like I think a lot of Brooklyn guys have their own cliques and labels like the Pro Eras, like the Flatbushes. But no one's really like coming out on top. We had that with Pop Smoke, maybe if you really want to go there, but like I think it was too short lived to really say anything. R.I.P. And then you have 6ix9ine, like I mean that would have been okay, like if he didn't end up being like this freaking federal case of a headache and like his antics are like it's just like you either love or hate him, but like look, still.
Look, bro. Right? So it's funny, right? Because I think you and I both would say that we, or at least our image of hip hop, or excuse me, New York hip hop back in maybe 2013, 14,
boom bap,
was very much pro era esque, right? Because like again, the Flatbushers, the pro eras, the underachievers. Some would even throw ASAP in there. Mm-hmm. The thing we asked, right? Up. So yeah, ASAP Mob, yeah. So it's not as if that throughout the years of this decade of hip hop that, or this again the 2010s era of hip hop that there weren't cool cats out there spitting and arguably spitting quote unquote that real, that dope, right? But I guess one of the issues that I always saw pervasive in the hip hop culture, and at least in New York, especially in comparison to Atlanta, is that the old, and I guess this goes to that gatekeeping thing, right? The old heads, established artists, they would not support the new guys to keep
That's
the
true.
Simple,
that is true, man.
They did not.
remember like in like the 2015 to like 2018 era, like anyone who like with a little like got on 97.1 just got like disrespected. Like they were like shitting on like Lil Uzi, like they were shitting
rapping on that type beat. How dare you,
Uzi? Like I was just like, ooh, like man, these are like I felt bad. Like I'm like, yo, like imagine like you were like 20, 21, like back in college, and like you were just doing your thing. You go like on an interview, and they're like, nah, like you garbage, by my standards. Like that's crazy. I don't know.
Hey man, it's hip hop. You're gonna get your feelings hurt. But yeah, that is right. That is kind of wild that you're literally just doing your thing, and then someone just like, nah.
Old man Ebro. I mean, I still love Ebro though.
I like Ebro. I like Ebro's ability to articulate his thoughts very well. Yeah. If nothing else, you can tell where it comes from. Some of the stances I just think are flat out wild, but that's with anyone really. Rosenberg, tighten up, bro. Like sometimes you be acting like a jellyfish.
Yeah.
Sometimes you be a little too spineless. I do like, but that being said, though, shout out to Rosenberg for putting on some of these rappers that we liked back on the late night. If That's you remember true. That, I assume he still does that. But yeah, it's just funny to think that the old heads in New York were not really supporting the young cats coming up, and I think that's one of the reasons why Atlanta really is flourishing. Because despite maybe the ceiling cap not being as high over there,
sure, they
allowed the kids to record and. The assumption is that for those who stick with the music stuff, sure, you might not be an amazing lyricist or amazing bar creator, but if you're making music that's, again, authentic to yourself and is able to have some kind of niche, maybe in the clubs, in the strip clubs, in the parties, in the house parties, in the rate, whatever, your music will carry. But if you have the old heads who have, I guess, access to these things, they're looking like, nah, bro, your shit weak, not good enough, try again. Because, I mean, at that point, obviously, they're doing it by their own laurels, but like obviously you either have to take more time to build up or you can only reach so far. Like sometimes I look at an artist like Joey Badass and wonder like how much further would he have gone if like all of hip hop said, quote unquote, he's the savior of hip hop. Let's make sure that because obviously Joey Badass and the Pro Era are big within the New York sphere for sure. Like they're definitely like legends within that within that region, I would say.
Yeah.
But I just wonder like if that support or love translated into support for the outwards, if that makes sense. And maybe it's not the region's job to, push their artists like that, but I do think it's symptomatic of why I guess New York sound or the New York style is kind of dying out. And then now, like you said, they're adopting,
Yeah.
melodic raps from was A Boogie with a Hoodie. Shout out to that Drowning
Right.
song that he made with Kodak Black, 2 or 3 years back, but still a phenomenal track.
Mhm.
To, like you said, the Pop Smoke, who definitely was looking like the next representative of hip hop, but R.I.P. was his life was taken. To 6ix9ine, who funny ass dude before everything hit the fan. At least you'd say he was the king in terms of sales. No one can dispute his
Right.
ability of attention to him. No one can. But even he didn't sound like
No.
he reminded me a little bit of the Onyx because of that raw, rough yelling sound. But not I guess quote unquote. Nothing of his demeanor or from his music said, "Oh,
Right.
he's a hip hop dude," except for
Exactly.
maybe how he talks. Man,
And
that 6ix9ine
yeah.
conversation, bro. That's for another. just remember this, bro. Just
Mhm.
remember this. Remember when people thought that 6ix9ine was a whole ass pedophile? Just remember
I mean,
that.
like,
And
isn't
people
he
were
still considered a pedophile?
no, yeah, like he was
Okay.
caught for having done
I was
sexual
like, did
acts
that stop?
with a minor. Yeah, no, he did. But remember when that was kind of like in the sphere
Yeah.
and people
I
were
don't
still
know.
bumping that music heavy, bro.
She's crazy. But yeah, like,
the things that will.
I feel
Yeah,
like the
sorry,
old
continue.
heads and, bro, I mean, East Coast, New York, whatever you want to say, like, New York old heads are like a different breed, man. Because it's almost like those people, like, like back in high school, like I was like the prom king, and I was the captain of the football team. Like, they're kind of looking back at the 90s and 2000s as like their defining moment, and like this is the standard that should always be upheld. And like, I think that's like why we're like now, like, there's a certain sound about like New York hip hop, and I'm talking more so about like the boom bap, like where we might be going into this decade and like hearing shit like that, like almost as a little bit like outdated. I still think it represents the city pretty well for some boroughs, but when you kind of like have this hindsight now of like, what was the point of just kind of shitting on all the newcomers? What was the point of saying this is not New York rap? What was the point of kind of closing off that, potential for artists to kind of push the creative boundaries, for artists like on the label like Pro Era, who were set to kind of pop off? They were in a good, like, this nice little sweet spot back in like what, 2012, 2013, 2011, probably, yeah, like around there, where they really never had that like kind of skyrocketing effect. No one else really, RIP Capital Steez, but no one outside of Joey really kind of followed him even. And it's kind of sad, like, because I think this region is like, for what it's worth, I know the last 3-4 years have not been the greatest for this city, with kind of the loss of Pop Smoke and guys like 5e and 6ix9ine, and now we have like, not to say anything bad against it, but like, we're looking at the playing field. We got like A Boogie with a Hoodie, we got like Dave East, we've got Lil TJ, and it's like, you kind of like wonder like what could have been, like, like, what if there was like some kid in like high school, middle school, really like coming out with like some great music, or like had the potential to do so, but was too scared, or maybe was like shut down because like nah, that shit's kind of whack, that shit's weird. And it's like this whole, sometimes maybe it is the region, like, that really does hold back a lot of these artists, these potential artists, to really create music.
Speaking on that, I guess there has to be also at least a question, right? And again, in tandem of hip hop's either commercialization or adoption in towards pop culture, also maybe being a factor of why the hip hop sound naturally dies down.
Right.
Because as much as I would like to, again, sort of say, oh, it's the old head should have supported, which it definitely should have. There's some kids that I remember, like back in the days when Hot 97 used to be like definitely in the heavy rotation for me. Specifically, this kid called Astro, or he ended up calling himself Stro, and this other kid called Bishop Naru.
Oh yeah,
Now,
Bishop.
yeah,
Had the
like
clap tape with MF Doom.
that's wild. Like this dude has a tape with MF Doom. Granted, more MF Doom beats with like one or two verses of him, but that's incredible.
Right.
That's honestly like legendary because MF Doom, he's eclectic, right? And seeing that a kid would, again, like I guess having the New York rapping ability at some point having the cosign, and then also having sort of the internet god himself or the underground god himself, MF Doom, bless him with that presence, and yet not seeing him blow up. I wonder if maybe New York artists either have this sort of weird premise in their head where they feel that if the music is good enough, that things will go, which definitely would have been the case back in the 90s and early 2000s, but now you need that sort of hustle mentality. Or maybe if literally, even if let's say I played, like you said, right, let's say if we played some Joey Badass right now for Johnny down the street who doesn't really like, who would probably just listen to the most popular hip hop sounds, and they listen to this and say, turn this off, let me hear some Codeine Raz by Future. Gucci flip flops and all that stuff. And that's not, again, shout out to the Gucci flip flops, that's a phenomenal song. But sometimes, who knows, like maybe hip hop's, importance of the the soundscape of, or, the birth of hip hop, which allowed for this, wonderful creation to be a thing. Maybe people are, for lack of a better term, over it, which hurts to say. It hurts. Or maybe the artists who carry this torches are just not marketable enough, but it's not, I guess, hungry or thirsty enough to really like make sure that people hear it because they have the like you've heard that before, right? Why is so and so on the radio or have so many fans? My music is so much better than theirs. And it's like, yes, sure, by these categorical standards they are, but there's a lot more to it than just quality. In fact, more times than not, it's really just about visibility and appeal, which is unfortunate, but that's how you are able to market a so-so artist and make him blow up, like your son that you've forsaken.
Lil Pump.
No, Lil Pimp.
Lil Pimp. I wonder if just maybe the commercialization, like I think you were kind of alluding to this a bit at the beginning of your point back there, like if the commercialization of hip hop has really also been like a barrier for these regions to kind of put forth artists that maybe up the ante a little bit, or change the rap game in either bars or production, or, maybe popular music. And we've talked about this before, how hip hop is, very much in the mainstream now. It's almost kind of scary how much it is, like in terms of the culture, in terms of like, even like just like average pop stars now, like fucking like Camila Cabello, like she's like a pop artist. She had Young Thug like on her song, like a number one song in the country, like maybe a year or two ago.
What about that TikTok song with the baby?
The Dua Lipa song? Yeah.
Perfect time.
Yeah. And then like Lil Nas X is now the most streamed male artist on Spotify.
Oh shit, for real?
I think the news came out a few days ago that he's
damn Drake.
Yeah, he's got millions and millions of listens.
Drop the album, Drake. You need that spot back.
Even Drake, man, like Drake is from Toronto, like, but he's transcendental in that way in terms of popular music. He kind of transcends just the Toronto. And he speaks Arabic. He's gone from patois to Spanish to now speaking Arabic. Like, it's almost like he's figured out some formula there where he's like, you know what? I'm from a city that is like has multiple like cultures and nationalities. There's a lot here. I can just fucking steal it all, or not steal. I didn't say that.
Influenced. He may be influenced by the regions. Feel me? From the West. He used to be a Houston sounding boy, and at one point he was on that drill rap scene.
Memphis. That too. And so like, it's And then I think it just goes back to like the internet era, like that kind of just busted the gates open, and like now everything's kind of like everything is just there to be picked apart, and like either in a creative way, like somebody like Isaiah, or even like Brockhampton, like in like just having like these little places across the country have these little pockets and neighborhoods where individual artists can come up on their own because they've kind of taken influences from these hip hop artists from the 2000s and the 2010s and like become their own artists and become huge. Or you have like this the other end of that spectrum, which is like the commercialization, where like now we have like these huge hits and like they almost sound like
Copy
generated
and paste.
copy and paste. But it's like, that comes with the game. Like I understand that too, but yeah, it's interesting now, like to see like how like what a region means, like or what a city means. It doesn't mean the same thing as it did like 20 years ago. It doesn't hold the same value as it did 20 years ago.
No, that's a fact. As much as let's say we view New York or L.A. and Atlanta, to some degrees, like if you want to make it, go over there, right? Remember, like artists used to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey man, like you could be the kid from Chattanooga, Tennessee. I've never heard of
Right.
Chattanooga until today. You could be a kid in Minnesota, I'm sure. Like I think at one point, what's his name, Zachary used to live there, or
Right.
even like even going back to TD, right? Like Watts. How many rappers do you know Watts that
Right.
I guess have blown up beyond that region, right?
Yeah.
Like sure, like we kind of view that as LA, but even like within the region of LA, there's like subdivisions and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But let me ask you this, fam: what of these subgenres or regional soundscapes of hip hop kind of stand out to you? Something that you like to bop to? So obviously, we're both old school East Coast hip hop heads, but like outside of that, is there like another style of hip hop that you'd like to like turn on maybe when you're bored and we need something different or just in a different mood?
I definitely like. There's something about, and I don't know if this is even really like a coherent or like actual region, but like the Midwest, like Chicago, Detroit. There's something about like, and I'm thinking about like early Kanye, Common, Danny Brown, and like maybe Big Sean, and maybe some guys on like Bruiser Brigade label. There's almost like this. They've got the hits, right? A lot of those artists have like some of the biggest hits of whatever year, like over the past 20 years. But there's something about like that region that kind of almost breeds like, yeah, I'm assuming this is just because it's the Midwest, so there's like, no offense, but like maybe there's not that much shit to do over there, so there's a lot of shit that like ends up happening in terms of like maybe like drug addiction, mental health. And I like kind of like, you kind of put me on the spot at the beginning about like how I like that storytelling. But I do like that aspect. Freddie Gibbs, from Gary, Indiana, Midwest. That's another one. Like these guys have like an element of spitting bars in a kind of narrative format, and they also have shit that like you can actually also like maybe party to or just like vibe to. So for me, actually, I would say Midwest. I was gonna say New York, but I would have to kind of like kick myself in the leg because I'd be living in the past, in that regard.
I mean, you can have multiple answers, bro. You can be both. Can be both. But real quick,
And I would
though,
I would put like West Coast before East Coast. Honestly, it kind of hurts to say, but
yo, get them guys. We found it.
I mean Tyler and Vince, like that's all I gotta say. This year alone, LBC and LA.
That's foul. That's foul, but I can't deny that.
Yeah.
So, so real quick for the New York guys, we do have to give props and congratulations towards if there's like one group of New York right that I feel like is quote unquote restoring the feeling is Kanye the Machine, Benny Butcher. Oh shit!
West Side Gun, bro.
Boop boop. No. Is that grrr? Or is that boop boop? See ya. I'm fucking up. But yeah, like the Griselda boys.
Yeah.
I don't know how it is that they did it. To be
Mac
honest with you, like,
Macami
well,
too. Macami too on Griselda. That dude, he's up next. I'm telling you.
hey man, all I can say is I listened to one of his mixtapes. Bah! That's it. But no, I guess when I look at the Griselda gangs even and wonder like how is it that they kind of because
Right.
they have gained recognition from the bigger artists and even again if you're in hip hop you don't have to be in the New York region to like know oh yeah those Griselda boys.
Right.
Hell, they might or might not have a track with Kanye West who knows. But I guess that would be to me another instance or case of artists who again quote unquote make that good music, but also put the work ethic in because bro they have a lot and I mean a lot of music underneath their belts. Like before they got popping, like they got like 20 plus album mixtapes or whatever you want to call that.
I mean, Benny just dropped a project last Friday, but it apparently was supposed to come out like 3 years ago. But he was like, you know what, we might as well drop this. We haven't dropped anything in 6 days, so.
It's interesting because this is the first time I've seen people saturate the market with what I would quote unquote consider like quality raps.
Yeah.
Like like literally like rapping wise, it's like if you don't like Coke bars, I'm sorry. Listen to Chance the Rapper, I guess, or excuse me, I'm married. My wife, Chance the Rapper. Still, I have no beef with that album, Chance. I'm waiting for the next tape. I don't hate it like everybody else does.
Me too.
But but yeah, like shout out to the Griselda boys, and I guess if nothing else, to all the New York cats who are growing up and wondering why can't I restore the feeling? Like I'm clear because I mean they are. Yeah, we agree they're technically more proficient, and at least there's a market for that type of like either spitting or just that specific narrative. Like I walk down with my Timbs. Like I'm chilling at your crib. Why are my Timbs underneath your couch or whatever the case may be, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I guess to all the New York artists, like, look, bro, the music or the sound that you're making is not quote unquote as accessible. So if you want to make more noise, you better get the hustle game in order. However you're gonna do it, because it's again that weird dichotomy of being an artist who's a creative, but also knowing how to market your stuff and. It's hard. I think best way, find yourself a team that does that for you, so you don't really have to taint the artistic making process. But always be plugged in because you don't want people to do stuff for you and you don't know what's happening around your camp. That's how you lose money.
Yeah.
But that's a tangent. Going back to the subgenres of different sonic soundscapes in hip hop. So obviously, I told you I'm an East Coast baby. Go figure. Wu-Tang Clan forever. They're for the children. But if there's like a certain hip hop style that I don't know why it just hits me every time, it's Chopped and Screwed.
Really?
I don't know what that is. There's something about that slowed down effect that just.
I feel like this is like a new thing about you. I've never heard. I mean, I've known you for like 5-6 years now.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard you say anything about Chopped and Screwed.
That's because we never had that discussion. But nah, man, Chopped and Screwed, like, it will always hit me in a certain way. It's that type of music that when it's nighttime, I'm chilling by myself.
True.
It just something about it, man. It just brings me to a trance. And obviously it's because of the BPMs being lowered and the EQs and all that stuff. But
I mean, Chopped and Screwed does have a special place in hip hop, and it unfortunately it's been gentrified into slowed in reverb.
I'll never forget when I saw this girl on TikTok say, "Here's the origin of slow to reverb," and I'm like, "Oh, you're talking about the DJ?" And then she mentioned some random YouTuber. I'm like,
no, that
YouTube
ain't
was
it.
Back in the '80s.
That ain't it. Disrespect right there.
People gotta do their history. You can Google it, bro. And then for whatever reason, I think most. Well, yeah, I mean, I think most people can attest and say that there's this weird appreciation of gangster rap as well, which I kind of associate more with like the West Coast sound. But for me, as someone who doesn't live that life, as someone who has not been in that environment, thank God, I can't relate to you just saying I shot a Glock at the at the ops. That doesn't mean anything to me. So you have to sort of package that storyline in a engaging fashion. That sounds a little bit fucked up when I said that, but. If you're painting a picture and you're painting a picture that probably won't relate towards an audience that doesn't understand your vision, create it in such a way that even if they don't understand the full vision, that they can at least appreciate it from a specific angle. Shout out to J-Rock, shout out to Schoolboy. I feel like these are two artists who've obviously painted, their war stories in a very interesting and intricate manner that even someone as myself who hasn't lived that life can take away some elements of stories from that. Also, shout out to the game, a big legend, changed
Yeah.
the game. Yeah, shout out to the game, and shout out to Dr. Dre also for finally co-signing artists again. I don't know if you know, but Dr. Dre was really dry for a
Yeah.
minute when it came to co-signing or bigging up people. Anderson .Paak, we up, baby. You working out with Bruno Mars. You got two
Right.
singles out with that team. I I need that. I need that man to
Mm-hmm.
get all the props that he deserves.
Yeah,
But
I can't believe I
that's
forgot
another
about
tangent.
gangster rap. There's something about gangster rap. It's almost like a novelty now. In terms of like actually like how it was like because when I think about gangster rap now, I think more so of like Chicago
Trap,
drill and
trap.
Atlanta trap. Yeah, and it's not really as like uh as you said, like painting a picture like it was like 20, 30 years ago. Like, and I think yes, West Coast had the monopoly on that. Um, it's almost like watching like a movie like Scarface. Like you know what like you're getting into. You don't really necessarily have you've never lived this life, but it's there's this factor about it that you're like, oh man, this shit kind of hard. I don't know, never experienced this. Maybe hopefully like I'll never get to experience this, but there's like there's art. It's art. It's an art form there. I think hip hop like sometimes people turn a blind eye or kind of disregard it or throw it away completely just because it's violent or like it's
The topics.
scary. And I think maybe they're just using this language because certain group of people preferred or like participate in this art form. Maybe I don't know. Maybe that
What
part
are
is
you
scary.
saying, sir? What in tarnation? My child is listening to the hip hops and will be starting to smoke the weeds, the devil's lettuce, and start popping those pew pews and eating the perkies and all that.
Eating the turkeys. Yeah. Um. But yeah, like honestly, yeah, this gangster rap has a place in hip hop. It's. I think it's a very like vital part of it, honestly, because it does depict a lot. And it gives like an insight into like maybe yeah maybe there is something about Chicago, maybe there is something about Atlanta, maybe there's something about West Coast. Maybe there is this overarching theme of gangster rap, but I think each region has probably something a little bit different to say about their experiences with that gangster life
For sure,
that
I would
shows
say
up.
that the West Coast definitely has a stronger emphasis on gang violence or
Mm-hmm.
blood and crip violence versus in Chicago, which it seems to be more like street justice or street violence. Right?
Mm-hmm.
You took one of my homies. I have to do the same. Even something similar to New York as well, but there's probably more of the dope dealing
Yeah,
stories around where in that lifestyle things get messy.
yeah,
And that's again, just again, you and I will both agree that hip hop touches up, a bunch of topics and some topics that are obviously less savory than others. That makes sense. But I would at least implore to anyone who has that, oh, I don't listen to hip hop because of, you know, guns, violence, drugs, and like I'm not gonna deny and say there aren't songs that truly are just glorifying. Yeah, I think most of us can agree and say, yeah, in fact, there's probably a lot of mainstream songs that don't have that additional nuance or additional depth.
right.
But I think you should rap, in my opinion, you should criticize the approach of tackling the topic rather than, the topic itself that's being discussed. Because, I always think back to Danny Brown, a man who, on his Triple X album, right? Shout out to that tape, by the way. It
Mm-hmm.
was about to be like decades anniversary.
10-year anniversary.
Beautiful. I still remember that tape and how he was just talking about all the drug abuse that he was doing, but it was presented in such a zany, over the top manner, kind of similar to Eminem when he was rapping about
Right.
all
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
wild stuff. That he just presented the topics in such a, I guess, sort of comedical tone. But he also had songs that I guess showed the other side of such a lifestyle. I'll never forget the song "Party All the Time," and when I remembered back to the college days, looking at some of the, people that you maybe remember in class that might not have returned the next semester.
Right. Maybe they turned into Admiral Admirals.
Yeah. And again, that's a fire bar, right? But
Yeah.
there's more to it than just that. And I think
Right.
that's, to all the conservative parents or Republicans who feel that the music is, and I'll just say this, right? To all the people who are vocally upset about the messages that are being presented in the music without maybe taking a deeper comb of trying to figure out the deeper message, but won't have, let's say, to all the sorry, excuse me, to all the people who are upset about the drug influence within rap, but don't have that same level of frustration or disgust for the companies producing prescription drugs,
Right.
and then having very poor laws in place for these drugs to be given to the right people in the right dosages.
Right.
You might be, what is it called? Being you might be virtual signaling a little
Uh
bit.
huh. Talk about the opioid crisis, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
bro. It's wild to me that these companies that have literally contributed towards the opioid crisis will just have to pay, millions of dollars, and then it can just proceed as
Right.
business.
And even that
So
millions of dollars is not even that much to them because they make
no,
billions
it's
and
just like it's the
billions.
cost of business. It's the
So
cost of doing business.
yeah, I would also like maybe like encourage. Do I necessarily think people tuning into a podcast about hip hop like to like I don't know if we're getting like first time people like you know I might consider hip hop again, but let me see what these guys have to say. But if you are here for that reason, um, maybe like thinking about like what are you trying to say like when you are trying to like maybe censor like tell like people like like this music's scary, or like I don't let my children listen to this, because I do think this is a reflection, when we talk about like violence and drugs and that type of lifestyle or the game. um, you kind of have to maybe also like think about like why is this a reality for certain people in this country? Why is this something that is why does this scare you? Right? Because it's hard to like maybe put yourself in that place of like having to be a dope dealer, having to be part of a gang to, and it's not, be maybe there is some aspect of like glorifying violence or whatever it is, but these people do it because for either financial reasons, for survival. It's not something that people like, the gang. I didn't choose the gangster life. The gangster life chose me. Not to be cliche, but like this is like part of the all these regions in hip hop. Like they're documenting life. All these regions have something to say, and I do think there's a lot of overlap and a lot of themes that all these regions share. So it's like kind of interesting. Like you can like listen to like something from Chicago or something from Atlanta, and like almost be like, sounds different, but like there are a few lyrics here that like kind of share the same kind of theme. So it's like and hip hop is, I don't know if it's the I guess the most recent like American genre, right? There hasn't been hip hop is like its own entity, and it was birthed here in the States. So it's like, how can you kind of like almost like disregard something as American as hip hop and kind of just take it at a surface level, and try to like downplay or disregard it, or kind of just because you don't understand it, because you don't understand it because it's not your reality. Um, so yeah, I do got a
Hey
question
man,
for you.
hold on. Just, and for those people, like you said, who tuned in for the first time, or maybe one of their hip hop friends said, "Hey, these guys' takes are amazing. Check it out. Click to this timestamp, or just check it from start to finish." Half of the people who go to college and university do it because their environment told them to. Right? Your guidance counselor at school, your mom and dad, or maybe your friends. How many people do you remember that went to college because they wanted to further their academic success, or said, "I want a certain career, and this is the way to achieve it"?
Right.
In that same way, our environment molds us. So, you know, do you recognize that the environment itself might be poisonous and toxic, but the people who live in that, the average person will just follow suit, and that's it.
Right. And it's
Soapbox
also like,
over.
I was having a conversation with my friend like a few weeks ago, and he said something on Instagram along the lines like, I guess he was playing music at a party, and someone was like I'm too white for this, and it's like what? Like I would never be like listening to like the Smiths or the Rolling Stones and be like, nah, I'm too Latino to like not get this. Like
You would be the one to say that, wouldn't you? Huh?
no, I would not. And the crazy thing too was, so not that I asked him like, like what were you playing? Were you playing something like DMX or some shit? Like I didn't really care because like that kind of sentence is inflammatory as fuck. But homie was just playing Thundercat, bro. Like, and Thundercat is a very like nuanced, like not like I wouldn't really consider him hip hop. Like maybe he's been on hip hop tracks and like produced, but he's like very like I guess more jazzy R&B soul in that era.
Black people music.
Exactly. Um, so it's like I don't know. Kind of have to
No,
like
that's a wild take.
yeah. I just remember that conversation I had with him, and it's like music is music. If you like it, you like it. But to kind of also shit on music just because you don't get it, because it's made by a certain race or certain region or whatever it is, like I don't know. That's that bullshit talking to me, in my opinion.
That's that weak shit, bro.
Yeah.
Now we got to go past it. Look, I'll say this. I definitely agree. Everybody educate yourself on the things that you like, right? It would be disingenuous for us to even say that if you, again, don't come from a quote, the hip hop culture, whatever that means,
Right.
and just started to want to make music in that culture, that you shouldn't. I don't subscribe to the guest disposition. Lord Jamal, he stays on Eminem's ass. I'm like, bro, come on, bro. Like,
Yeah.
Eminem clearly, like, yeah, he definitely benefited from his whiteness, but even himself was able to recognize that. But let's
Right.
not act like this man hasn't made dope music and dead ass moved, hip hop music in a more commercially viable space,
Right.
right? And his lyricism is also, I'd say, top 20 easy. You could even say top 10. Like his ability to write, crazy.
Right.
So I guess it's just to say that make the music that you want to make, but understanding which space that you occupy in, and don't be defensive about that. I guess is the ultimate thing I'd say. Like just recognize, yeah, you know, I'm a corny blah 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 dude or girl or whatever. Well, or else I'm making this type of music. I understand it's not necessarily
Just
my lane or my perceived
Yeah.
lane, but like
just do
I'm gonna
you.
just keep doing it.
Be like a Mac Miller. Never claim anything. Allow yourself to flourish, and you will have an illustrious career. Versus
The
someone
music will
like
speak for itself.
Tom. Why can't I speak? Tom McDonald, like who has
Who?
this like fucking like chip on his shoulder for no reason, and like just harboring on the fact that like I'm a white rapper and I'm getting shitted on because I'm a white rapper, and lyrical miracle, like
And look, by the
commercialization.
way, I'm sure that people hate him just off of that and not because of his music. I'm sure. I'm sure.
A
But
lot of people
like
hate
you
him.
said,
A
right?
lot of people love him, though.
I mean, yeah, I'm sure. Other people who
Yeah.
like again are well, again whatever. People like hip
Yeah,
hop
yeah,
for
yeah.
different reasons. Like
Exactly.
let's not shit on that. But yeah, like yeah, dude, like you're a white guy in a quote unquote predominantly black genre. People are gonna look at you funny way, might even be mad. But as long as your intentions are pure and you're able to sort of say this is not, I understand what's happening, but I'm not part of that,
Yeah.
and just able to move forward. You'll have an illustrious career. I mean, even Russ, remember him? Yeah,
Yeah.
no, he's a big artist. He
Yeah.
had to deal with that too at some
Yes.
point.
I actually don't mind Russ because I actually think he's a little annoying a little bit on social media, but like he actually, I feel like he's come out and said like a lot of things about like I don't claim to be anything. I let my music speak for itself, which I think is a little bit. He says it in an arrogant way, but like I think he still says the the correct thing.
Russ's personality is unfortunately, I think, his quote unquote least enjoyable trait. I think it's something that's rather off putting. But his takes, eight, 9 times out of 10, I feel that there's definitely like nuggets of wisdom. And the
Yeah.
fact that he, himself as an independent artist was able to amass such a dedicated fan base,
Yeah.
it's something that needs to be studied in
Yeah.
terms of his music. I'm not offended by it.
Yeah.
If one of my friends plays it, I'm not gonna say turn it off, but I don't think I'm actively looking for Russ in my playlist.
Yeah.
It's just not what I'm quote unquote gravitated to. Maybe he needs to do some chopped and screwed. Who knows?
True.
I might be a Russ fan.
All right. So got a question for you. So we
Yeah,
got
yeah,
New York, East Coast.
yeah,
We got West
yeah.
Coast.
Of course.
And then
Don't forget Florida now.
hold on. So we got the South. So I'll reserve. Let's put two spots. Let's say Atlanta and Florida as the South. So we'll put two spots there, and even Texas and Tennessee. You can think about
Yeah,
that as well. And then I would also say Chicago. Chicago has really come up in the last 2-3 years. I mean, it started off, back in the days with like Common and Kanye, and I think even before that, you had other cats from that region as well. But I don't know. Run me through. Who do you think is sitting at the top of each region? Starting off wherever you want. Take your time. I know it's a little bit heavy right now, but
okay. Okay. So for New York, um, I'm gonna
or
say
even
it's a
East Coast.
toss. All right, yeah. So the East Coast, which I'm gonna say New York. I'm gonna say right now it's gonna be a toss between one of the little drill rappers. I'm gonna say Lil TJ, I think was his name. Or who
Oh,
was Pop Smoke's right hand man? There's like someone who was like really close with him.
TJ 5e.
Fabio, excuse me, Fabio Foreign.
Okay.
It's either between Fabio Foreign or the Griselda as a movement. But if he said, "Oh, I can't do that," I'm gonna put my money on Fabio. I
Okay.
think that kid has grasped his artistic, expression very well. I've seen him on Funk Flex rap for like 7 minutes straight. People were losing their minds, recording and everything.
Yeah.
Mans may or may not be on Kanye's album. We'll see. And I think that's obviously like usually like a great indicator of things to come.
Right.
Just give me the region. Just give me the region.
West Coast. We're talking about current too, not like all
Yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, I got you. Yeah, I got you. Like, yeah, right now, who I would say is taking the torch.
Yeah.
I mean, easy answers like TDE, but I feel like they're a little bit like cemented in the game, so
Sure.
I don't want to. That feels a little like easy from Kendrick.
Right.
Man, Kendrick been had that. You know who I would say, and this might be very biased of me. In fact, it is. It's biased of me, but this is I'm allowing myself this because I'm not using commercial appeal or sales as a factor as much as just respect and impact. I gotta say, my boy Vince Staples, man.
Damn, bro, you taking my answer, man.
Like right now, like that album of his that he just dropped, just the fact, just him being able to convey his narrative that is not necessarily particularly new on this tape, but just in such a digestible manner. The beats are right. Well, Kenny did the samples right. He got he got quotables, everything, and he's supposedly dropping another album.
Yep.
And that's the thing; he's been very consistent when it comes to his musical output. Like Vince is like the definition of consistency. Like he might be the West Coast's Jadakiss, in my opinion. So yeah. Well, give me another region.
Chicago.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it one. See, asked me this like 3-4 years earlier, it would have been Chance / Vic.
Oh. Yeah. Damn. That's crazy how that's crazy how much has changed.
Yeah, no, that's.
I'll let you decide on like who's like the king now of Chicago, but like, damn, I didn't realize like, damn, Chance, Chance, come on, man.
Remember, yeah. All right, so I was gonna say King Von R.I.P. because he was on the come. Well, he was on the come up. So I guess I'll say Lil. It's either is Chief Keef from Atlanta or no?
Chicago.
I mean, sorry, from Chicago.
Yeah.
Is he?
Yeah.
Chief is definitely a legend in my opinion. If you'd say a possibly upcoming one, I'm gonna give it to Lil Durk. Yeah. His consistency in the rap game, the fact that he's been able to go up and down. He did the commercial sound back in 2014-15 with Dej Low, then went back to the streets, and then was just consistently grinding. At some point, was on Drake's song, and may or may not be on Kanye's album. It shows longevity, and it's definitely longevity. And it's definitely didn't expect it, considering I saw him as one of the sidekicks of Chief Keef, if you know what I mean. So
I would agree with that.
Big Mensa and Chance.
I know, dude. That's so crazy. Like, and like that was, back then Chance and Vic were like, they were going up against Chief Keef, arguably. Like, not that Chief Keef has fallen off, but Chief Keef was still around his prime back then too. Like, he was still no joke. He was still cemented as a legend back then. He was still coming out with music. But then I love my wife.
Hey man, no,
And also
there's
Vic
nothing
just
wrong with
and also Vic just fumbling his whole career.
as well. This man really had a Kanye feature. You remember that song with the horns? Why you mad,
Why You
bro?
Mad?
Or why you mad?
Yeah.
Hey man, who knows? I'll say this much: Vic Mensa's previous two tapes he just dropped, when he's back to rapping, I've enjoyed them honestly. So who knows?
Wow.
He might come back.
All right.
We miss you, Vince.
You got the South. You can either say one or a couple, because it is big. It's a big region.
Yeah, no, that's a big region. Yeah. All right. First and foremost, just quick shout out to my boy TD Boy, aka 2 Chainz. That man is funny as hell. But again, that's more of a goated legend. I think he's goated. One of the guys that's coming up there, actually, believe it or not, is the kid JID.
Okay.
Jid. Yeah. People forget he's from the South because, he's rapping. He's part of Dungeon Family or like off of that ilk. I see good things for Jid. I see good things for Jid coming up. Yeah. And in terms of the SoundCloud sound, the melodic, approachable music, I might be off the pipe on this one, but I'm gonna give it to Pooh Shiesty or Mulatto, the female artist. I see a very bright, successful future in both of these artists, assuming that there's no legal trouble following. Okay. But even legal trouble could sometimes improve your career.
Yeah.
But yeah, those would be like the two approachable artists. I think they have staying power. But yeah.
Okay. So, I think with that in mind, yeah, it's interesting, like how huge the playing field is, like how many people are in here, like who's really at the top of the game, and each region has a couple people that are taking over. They're at the top of the charts. They're doing their thing, and I think we always kind of like to talk about the future is bright with hip hop, but even this discussion kind of shows you maybe we'll see how this continues to develop in terms of regions and everything, but how, if you want to see it as a blessing, if you want to see it as a curse, but how regions are no longer kind of holding back. And I'm thinking about a guy like Vince Staples, kind of similar to Isaiah Rashad, who's from LBC, and he's not necessarily combining sounds, but he's taking influences from the past, from Long Beach, and almost modernizing them, or kind of using his own influences and kind of molding it into this new sound. So it's kind of interesting that he's from LBC, doesn't really sound his music doesn't really sound traditionally like something like Snoop Dogg or some shit like that. But if you watch his interviews and stuff, he kind of documents a lot of the sounds that were coming out from the 80s and 90s, and how it was very electronically driven. And then you're oh, I guess that's why he chooses or raps over the production that he does. It doesn't really sound like West Coasty, but it is there's still a driving force and beat behind it. So yeah, well, I think we'll still have to kind of see how this kind of plays out, whether regions will even be less of a thing or more of a thing 5 years from now, 2 years from now, whatever it is. But
I guess the ultimate takeaway from this discussion, which I was able to gain through our interaction, is I guess learning that artists are no longer, I guess, quote unquote, required or forced or need to necessarily represent their hood or their environment, right, or their region as much as they just convey their own personal identity and story and choose whichever landscape best reflects, their artistic expression, which ultimately is a beautiful thing. It makes, like I said, the water's very muddy. It's well, how is so-and-so, let's say, how's French Montana a New York artist when he damn near sounds like he's from, the South. But does French Montana make good music? Of course he does. That's why he's being able to stay in the game so long. And I'm also sure that he, has bars on his what is it, Cheese and Max series. If you really want that, you could probably dig some tapes up. So it just, it's beautiful, really. Like it's ultimately a beautiful thing. And sure, again, the old heads are like, this isn't the hip hop that I know, and I feel you, bro. I feel you. But just guess what? You can always play back, go back to your tapes or your vinyls or your CDs or your iPod and relive those glory days when you were back in high school or college, acting a fool, and that was the soundtrack music to your life until quote unquote reality hit, or you got your heart broken, or whatever the case may be.
And hopefully, us Connecticut boys will have a sound or a savior to look towards. I heard there's
Sai Baba.
I heard there's a mythical legend out there, and he's on a quest in Europe right now. But when he returns, the legend of Stony Main, Sai Baba Satya, will take the helm of the Connecticut throne.
And just be a beacon of hope to show to all those and the CT kids that, hey, you don't have to go to New York to make it. You don't have to go. No, you can do it right here.
Yeah.
And all the kids in the suburbia cities will rock with you.
All the black kids in the suburbs and the white kids in the what's that Tyler line? I forget. Whatever it was. But yeah, regional kings. What do we sound like? What are we looking for? It's all going to be interesting to see, how it plays out in the next few years. So, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But hey, yo.
Yeah.
Steady rotation. We're closing out. It's been a pleasure having you on here again, Queso, sharing the space with you. And, this episode's dropping tomorrow. And then we'll be back at it again on our regular schedule come this Saturday. So, to the fans, we got you, appreciate everything.
We didn't forget you, man. We just have to make you guys miss us just a little bit, feel me? Just to remind y'all. And hey, I'm crystal clear now, so no more mumble mouth, or at least HD mumble mouth, feel me?
HD mumble mouth.
You know what it is. Also, shout out to my boy Riff Raff.
Oh,
that man was a clown. But
I forgot about that guy.
It's beautiful, man. That was a great time in hip hop, man. And also shout out to Action Bronson, man. I low key want Action Bronson to see. Man, that's a discussion for another time. But,
True.
Man, again, we're old heads now, so there's some artists that we really rock with. I guess we wish.
Heads, man. We're not there.
No, but we sound like some old heads to the new kids. They're like,
I guess, sure. But yeah, I mean, I feel like we still keep up, I think.
Hey man, all I can say is that the new stuff doesn't stay in my rotation like that. But it does stay in my rotation. Donda.
I thought you were going to say steady rotation.
Donda.
All right, man. This has been episode 6, steady rotation, and we out.
Take care.